After nearly 2 years, the Mueller report has finally been made public, giving us all a chance to review the special counsel's findings. The president's opinion seems to have changed very little, repeating his now familiar refrain of no collusion, no obstruction. But it's not so clear-cut. Mueller's investigation did not find that the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with Russia to interfere in the 2016 election. But the special counsel's team did find a series of contacts between Trump campaign officials and individuals with ties to the Russian government. And the report paints a picture of a president who committed acts that were, quote, capable of exerting undue influence over law enforcement investigations, putting pressure on his White House counsel to fire Robert Mueller, asking former Attorney General Jeff Sessions to unrecuse himself from the Russia investigation, and asking the Deputy Attorney General to mislead the public about why the president fired former FBI Director James Comey. But the special counsel concluded Trump's efforts to influence the investigation, quote, were mostly unsuccessful, largely because the persons who surrounded the president declined to carry out orders or accede to his requests. The special counsel's findings also detail a culture of mistruths at the White House from the top down. The president falsely claiming reports about his administration were fake news, his staff misleading the public multiple times about Comey's firing, and the president himself dictating a misleading statement to the public about that 2016 Trump Tower meeting. Now, as we brace for what could be a long legal battle over the full report and Congress's role, these key lines could determine what happens next. If we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, we are unable to reach that judgment. Accordingly, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. For more on all this, we're joined now by Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway. Good morning, Kellyanne. Thanks for coming in on an Easter morning. The president says there is total vindication, complete exoneration, no collusion, no obstruction. I want to start with obstruction. You have seen what the Mueller team concluded, and I want to go to that ending line. While this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. So how does the president call this complete exoneration?
The president says that because he's known from the beginning that there was no collusion. There's no criminal conspiracy between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin to try to disrupt and spread disinformation about our elections. And that really was a central premise here. I think ABC was among the first networks to ever use the word collusion in July of 2016, mainly because the Obama administration knew what Russia was trying to do.
Kellyanne, I want to go back to obstruction of justice and what Mueller concluded, and I'll read it again. While this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate.
But that's not really, respectfully, that's not really the job of a prosecutor. The job of a prosecutor is to gather evidence and decide whether to indict or to decline to indict. They declined to indict. The president is not going to jail. He's staying in the White House for 5.5 more years. Why? Because they found no crime, no conspiracy. That was the central premise. That is what everybody, including your next guest, Adam Schiff, said time and again, dozens of times, hundreds of times, in print, on Twitter, on TV. And I think there's a couple other things in the Mueller report that are very important. Not only was obstruction of justice not found, that there was complete compliance. So as Mr. Barr, Attorney General, has also said, that the sheer compliance, the millions of pages of documents, the 500 witnesses, the 2,800 inquiries, the subpoenas, on and on, all of this means that $25 million of taxpayer money, the 2 years that we've been doing this, that they were never interfered or impeded. So there was no obstruction.
We're getting away from this. So will you acknowledge that Mueller explicitly refused to clear the president on obstruction?
There was no reason for him to do that or not to do that for a very simple reason. The central premise here was collusion, and there isn't any. And I am really shocked that the same people who
exactly what you were talking about. 2 years, he looked at obstruction of justice,
and if he could have charged a crime, he would have, because
so
there's enormous pressure.
So you think this totally exonerates him?
Yes.
From obstruction of justice.
Yes, I do. And the word exoneration was unnecessary in the Mueller report, and I would say inappropriate. Just like the May 9th, 2017 memo by the newly confirmed 94-6 Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Rosenstein made clear that FBI Director Jim Comey the summer before should never have gone out and said, we're declining to prosecute Hillary Clinton. You just don't do that. You either prosecute or you don't. You either bring an indictment or you don't. And in this case, no one named Kushner, Trump, anybody associated with the campaign
I want to stick to what has happened in this report. The president is now calling the report crazy. Mueller highly conflicted on March 26th. Just a few weeks ago, Trump said he thought Mueller acted honorably. Does he still think that?
I certainly do. And I think there's enormous pressure on Director Mueller and his team to have produced what many Trump haters and critics and people who got the election so wrong were hoping they would produce, which is proof that this election never should have happened. Martha, for 2 years, people denied the electability of Donald Trump. And then for 2 years, people denied the election of Donald Trump. And I think there are some people who are way too invested in the outcome here and should admit that. They should say that they're partisan or they didn't want him, they never saw his election coming. So they wanted to be able to say, I never saw his election coming because they cheated and they stole the election and they were colluding with Russia. The most important,
let's go back to
Can we talk about the Russian interference, though? Because that is important.
We're going to talk about the Russian interference. I want to go through this Mueller report. Mueller cites a series of unsuccessful actions the president took to try to influence the investigation, including then White House counsel Don McGahn telling him to have Mueller removed in June 2017 and later asking McGahn to deny that had happened. Here's what the report says. McGahn recalled that the president called him at home twice and on both occasions directed him to call Rosenstein and say that Mueller had conflicts that precluded him from serving as special counsel. McGahn recalled the president telling him, Mueller has to go and call me back when you do it. In January of 2018, the New York Times reported that the president had ordered McGahn to fire Mueller. And in the Mueller report, it says, after the story broke, the president, through his personal counsel and 2 aides, sought to have McGahn deny that he had been directed to remove the special counsel. Each time he was approached, McGahn responded that he would not refute the press accounts because they were accurate in reporting on the president's effort to have the special counsel removed. But here's what the president said when asked whether he'd ever tried to fire Mueller.
Mr. President, have you thought about or considered leading to the dismissal of the special counsel? Or is there anything that Bob Mueller could do that you would send you in that direction?
I haven't given it any thought. I mean, I've been reading about it from you people. You say, oh, I'm going to dismiss him. No, I'm not dismissing anybody.
And this is what he said when the story came out in the New York Times about Don McGahn's refusal when asked if he sought to fire Robert Mueller. He said, fake news, folks, fake news, typical New York Times, fake news. But that's not true, is it? The president did try to have Mueller removed, and it was not fake.
That is a couple of minutes of one side, so I hope that you'll give me ample time to respond, Martha. I've been sitting here patiently and respectfully. Martha, this has been a frustrated president about an ill-conceived, illegitimate investigation from the beginning. And in the Mueller report, if you're not just cherry-picking a couple of pieces, in the Mueller report, you see again and again no interference or obstruction of an investigation that the president believed from the beginning and knew from the beginning has been proven to be
We're talking about what the president said. He called it fake news. He said he did not try to have Mueller.
Conspiracy.
He said he did not have any effort to try to remove. That's not true.
The Mueller report itself says that there was no interference. That document says there was no interference. The Mueller report I
just read to you.
If Mueller wanted to, if the president wanted to fire Bob Mueller, he would have. In other words, he has the authority to do that. He fired Director Comey. He's fired other people from the White House. He's fired cabinet members.
Why did the president say to the press and the public that he had not thought about removing Mueller?
He thinks the whole thing is fake news. He was
so it's still fake news? Is the Mueller report fake news?
No, the Mueller report clearly shows that Russia...
The Mueller report clearly shows that
Martha,
the president called Don McGahn.
If I may respond. The Mueller report does say that Russia tried to interfere with this election. Military officials, people at the highest levels, but, quote, unsuccessfully to affect the outcome of the election, which means Donald Trump has been legitimately elected fairly and squarely. And number two, the alleged Russian interference in the election was done with unaided by anybody in the Trump campaign. I thought that's
what
we were
Don McGahn telling the
investigating.
truth in the Mueller report?
Don McGahn stayed on the job for 18 months after that. So I think that's very telling because
Was Don McGahn telling the truth
he's
when he
an honorable
said
man. I wasn't
the
there for
president
any of
asked
their
him to remove
conversations
Mueller?
in this regard. And I will tell you that Don McGahn, I believe that if he were ever
But
asked
you also
to
said that he would not, that you denied that Don McGahn tried to.
Well, the president never asked me that question. I can speak to that. But let's not mislead the viewers as to what the Mueller report
But you said
truly
we are
does,
complying and
which is
cooperating with the investigation.
Donald Trump-
He has not even discussed not firing. He has not discussed firing Bob Mueller.
Me? Definitely not discussed it with me. I can speak for my conversations with the president. There are other things in the Mueller report that don't sound like Donald Trump. He has never, I've been by his side for 3 straight years. He has never once said to me, my candidacy is over, even though others were saying it was. My presidency is over. So what I want the viewers to understand is what is in this report and what's not in this report. There will be no criminal charges brought against President Trump. There will be no criminal charges brought against anybody in his family or anybody connected to his campaign that I managed to a successful end. If anybody should be outraged today, it's all of us who have spent years of angst and anxiety with people who never saw his election coming, trying to put an asterisk next to it. Now, we should be concerned about Russian interference.
I do want to talk about Russian interference, but I want to get a
that.
clear answer on Don McGahn. Do you believe Don McGahn when he says the president tried to get him to fire Bob Mueller?
I believe the president was frustrated about the investigation from the very beginning and knew it was ill-conceived. And I would remind everybody something that gets zero coverage, which is days before.
Please answer that question,
You've
Kelly.
got to ask Don McGahn and the president. I can
It
only
is
talk
in
about.
the Mueller report,
I can
and
tell you
Don
that
McGahn said he is telling the truth.
I don't
Under
believe,
oath.
I don't
Why
believe it
would he-
amounts to obstruction of justice. And if it had, then Mueller would have said this is
But do you
obstruction
believe
of
Don McGahn?
justice. I believe that Don McGahn is an honorable attorney who stayed on the job 18 months after this alleged incident took place, and that if he were being asked to obstruct justice or violate the Constitution or commit a crime, help to commit a crime by the President of the United States, he wouldn't have stayed. I certainly wouldn't stay. The president was rightly frustrated and trying to, like everybody else tries to do, make an ill-conceived, illegitimate investigation that's produced no collusion, no criminal conspiracy, no indictment, no impeachment of this president. He was trying to make it go away because he says on page 61 of Volume 2, people should read it, Mueller admits that the president is rightly frustrated that he thinks this ill-conceived investigation is going to affect his ability to go forward with foreign policy and his domestic agenda. He's been under a cloud from day one, even though on January 6th...
We have just a few minutes, and I do want to talk
FBI
about
Director Comey
collusion.
goes to Trump Tower. This is important. Never bothers to come and meet the president-elect for 2 months between his election and January 6th. Comes for that intelligence briefing in Trump Tower. You know how Jim Comey spends the last minutes of his time telling the president about some unverified dossier, about some golden shower nonsense that's been disproven in the Mueller report. The BuzzFeed report was wrong.
Let's talk about what else was not proven. The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference.
Yes, very important.
That is exactly right in the Mueller investigation. But at the heart of this investigation was Russia's role in the 2016 election, and the Mueller report was unequivocal about that as well, saying the Russian government interfered in the 2016 presidential election in sweeping and systematic fashion. The investigation established that the Russian government perceived it would benefit from a Trump presidency and worked to secure that outcome, and that the campaign expected it would benefit electorally from information stolen and released through Russian efforts. You were campaign chair. Do you accept that Russia worked to help elect Donald Trump?
I think they tried to sow disinformation, discord in our democracy, and we should never allow that from any foreign government, foreign actor. They were also unsuccessful. Donald Trump won. We didn't need WikiLeaks. We had Wisconsin. He won because he was the better candidate with the better message. And we had a fraction of the personnel. We had a fraction of the resources. And we were very smart about deploying our 2 greatest assets, Donald Trump and Mike Pence. Martha, it's very important that your next guest, Adam Schiff, to his credit, he and the senator of his state, Dianne Feinstein, pled with President Obama to do more about Russian interference. They sent a letter to President Obama in September of 2016. Your own network talked about collusion in July of 2016. This was an open secret during the Obama administration.
Congressman Schiff about that.
To their credit, people were trying to get the Obama administration to be more serious. They dropped the ball completely, looked the other way. Why? Because the candidate they wanted to win, they thought would win. That is a disgrace on our democracy, and it should never happen again. But let me make very clear. As campaign manager, I never gave a thought to Russian interference, to Russia helping us. I was talking to people.
You retweeted some things that came from Russian trolls inadvertently.
And I was contacted by WikiLeaks and never responded. I'm sure the investigators know that. And so,
I want to end here with something Senator
He won fairly and squarely, and when we see President Trump get reelected, people will point to a couple things like taxes, deregulation, foreign policy.
Tens of millions of people read those social media posts.
But do you know why I also get reelected? We'll look back at this week. And we'll look at this this ill-conceived investigation into collusion, which was meant to sound spy-like and
Actually,
furtive.
they didn't
it's
use
a criminal
that word.
conspiracy.
They used conspiracy.
No, the investigators used the right word. But most of the people in the media in the Democratic Party, which sometimes is difficult to know the difference.
And the president's still using that.
A collusion. But they're all trying to say, well, we don't use that word. Adam Schiff, in at least 14 tweets I saw today, constantly on TV, collusion. It was meant to sound furtive. It was meant to sound criminal. It was meant to sound like the president would be frog-marched out of office. People will look back at this week as another reason he got reelected. Mark my words, because they spent 22 months, $25 million in taxpayer dollars, constantly beating the drum of collusion. That's why I think that you have many of the 2020 candidates and Nancy Pelosi standing here themselves saying we're not talking impeachment.
Let me end with this. You have read the report. You have also read reports of lying in the White House and that atmosphere, about Comey, about other things, about the Trump Tower.
What do you mean Comey?
Why Comey
because
was
he's
fired.
the proven liar.
Why Comey was fired.
No. I think Comey was fired for several reasons. First of all, Comey himself has admitted that the president has the absolute constitutional authority to fire the FBI director. But I will tell you, when I went on TV in those ensuing days, I relied almost exclusively on the Rosenstein memo from May 9th, 2017. It's a remarkable document that I had memorized at the time. The name of that document, that memo, is called Restoring the Integrity of the FBI. And it goes on to say that Jim Comey usurped Attorney General Loretta Lynch's power. He should never have done a press conference. That the way that he handled the end of the Hillary Clinton email investigation.
Mueller on why Trump fired Comey. Substantial evidence indicates that the catalyst for the president's decision to fire Comey was Comey's unwillingness to publicly state that the president was not personally under investigation, despite the president's repeated request that Comey make such an announcement. I just want to end here with a comment by Senator Mitt Romney, who also weighed in on this. He released a strong statement Friday about the report. Here's what he said. I am sickened at the extent and pervasiveness of dishonesty and misdirection by individuals in the highest office of the land, including the president. I am also appalled that, among other things, fellow citizens working in a campaign for president welcomed help from Russia. Senator Romney did say it was good news that the president wasn't charged with a crime, but he have a point that this shouldn't be the standard for the highest office in the land.
The campaign that I managed in those last few months did not welcome help from Russia. In fact, I don't recall being offered help from Russia. It would have been a ridiculous prospect.
Should the president at least apologize for WikiLeaks, saying
I think the president deserves an apology from millions of people in this country, including those who have an awful lot of power in this country, in a particular political party, many in the media as well, who didn't just say, let's let the Mueller investigation go on and let's see what the conclusion is, but day after day, graphic after graphic, chyron after chyron, panel after panel, story after story, we're leading the public to believe that there was collusion, there was criminal conspiracy. As for Mr. Romney, as the junior senator in Utah, who certainly wanted to sit in the Oval Office, was promised indeed by his overpaid and underwhelming consultants that he would be elected president. I thought that Mr. Romney missed a great opportunity, Senator Romney missed a great opportunity this weekend to say one very important thing, which is that he was right in 2012 when he said to the whole world in a debate against then President Barack Obama that the biggest geopolitical foe was Russia. People laughed at him, the media ignored him. He was right about that. And I think that President Obama should have listened to those words in 2014 when he had ample evidence that Russia was trying to interfere in our democracy and in our elections. So, but instead, Senator Romney did what most people do. They have to have Trump as the subject, the predicate, and the adverb in every sentence, whereas he should say, look, the Mueller report exonerates me, Mitt Romney. I was right about Russia trying to sow discord. I think this is why many people want to investigate the investigators now and find out why the Obama administration ignored Russian interference and how we got that FISA warrant, the phony dossier.
That's got to be your last point there, Kellyanne.
Thank you for having me. No, full exoneration, no obstruction, no criminal conspiracy. The president and everyone should have a happy Easter, happy Passover, whatever it is that you celebrate. Thank you, Martha.
Thanks very much, Kellyanne. And joining me now, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff, the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman Schiff, Kellyanne Conway has said you should resign as committee chair. I assume you will not. But what about the evidence? You just heard her. You have said there is ample and abundant evidence of collusion, leaving the very strong impression there was illegal activity.
Well, you heard another display of alternate facts from Kellyanne Conway today, where she could not even acknowledge that the Russians tried to help the Trump campaign and did provide substantial help to the campaign. But look, I've been very clear over the last year and a half, that there is ample evidence of collusion in plain sight. And I use that word very carefully because I also distinguish time and time again between collusion, that is acts of corruption that may or may not be criminal, and proof of a criminal conspiracy. And that is a distinction that Bob Mueller made within the first few pages of his report. In fact, every act that I pointed to as evidence of collusion has now been borne out by the report. And I will also say that with respect to most of those acts involving the meeting at Trump Tower, involving the provision of polling data, involving the discussions between the National Security Advisor and the Russian ambassador, all these and so many more, Kellyanne Conway and the President of the United States called this fake news, disputed that these facts were even facts.
But
we now know from Bob Mueller they were facts.
You went farther than saying ample evidence. You once described to me on this program that the Trump administration's actions related to the Russia probe are, quote, of a size and scope probably beyond Watergate. What do you say now?
Well, I think it's clear from the Mueller report that that's exactly right. The obstruction of justice in particular in this case is far worse than anything that Richard Nixon did. The break-in by the Russians of the democratic institutions, a foreign adversary, far more significant than the plumbers breaking into the Democratic headquarters. So yes, I would say in every way this is more significant than Watergate. And the fact that a candidate for president and now a president of the United States would not only not stand up and resist Russian interference in our election, but would welcome it, goes well beyond anything Nixon did. The fact that the President of the United States would take Putin's side over his own intelligence agencies go well beyond anything Richard Nixon did. So, yes, I think it is far more serious than Watergate.
On obstruction of justice, based on the information in the report, do you believe the president did obstruct justice?
I do believe that he obstructed justice and did so in many ways. And I think that the Mueller report points out how the elements of obstruction are met in several instances, several courses of the president's conduct. What Bob Mueller said, and this is obviously directly contrary to what Bill Barr represented to the country, is that he felt bound by the Office of Legal Counsel opinion that he could not indict a sitting president. Now, Kellyanne Conway points to that as proof of innocence, but it's not. Bob Mueller made it abundantly clear he felt he could not indict the president. The most that he could do was say that the evidence did not exonerate the president. And I think the reason why he did that is because he could not only not indict the president, but I think he also felt that he could not say that the president should be indicted, because that would be effectively the same thing. That would cast the same stigma over the president that the president would be powerless to remove. So I think that's why Bob Mueller made that non-traditional prosecutorial judgment. He came as close to saying that the evidence of obstruction was evidence of a crime as he could within the Department of Justice regulations. And that's, I think, the point that he was trying to get across, that he preserved the evidence for when the president was out of office, and that he also laid out the evidence so that Congress could understand and undertake its own responsibility.
And Congressman Schiff, let's turn to impeachment. Senator Elizabeth Warren has tweeted, "The severity of this misconduct demands that elected officials in both parties set aside political considerations and do their constitutional duty. That means the House should initiate impeachment proceedings against the President of the United States. You've said, unless there's bipartisan support for it, it is a bad idea. But what about that constitutional duty or any precedent that this might set?"
Well, look, I think Elizabeth Warren makes an important point, and that is that the level of evidence in the Mueller report is serious and damning, and in a normal circumstance would be, I think, without question within the realm of impeachable offenses. We are, unfortunately, in an environment today where the GOP leadership, people like Kevin McCarthy, are willing to carry the president's water no matter how corrupt or unethical or dishonest the president's conduct may be. And in those kind of circumstances, when Mitch McConnell will not stand up to the president either, it means that an impeachment is likely to be unsuccessful. Now, it may be that we undertake an impeachment nonetheless. I think what we are going to have to decide as a caucus is what is the best thing for the country? Is the best thing for the country to take up an impeachment proceeding because to do otherwise sends a message that this conduct is somehow compatible with office? Or is it in the best interest of the country not to take up an impeachment that we know will not be successful in the Senate because the Republican leadership will not do its duty? That's a very tough question, and I think it's one we ought not to make overnight.
Just a final question here, Congressman. You said the Attorney General, Bill Barr, did a grave disservice to the country by misrepresenting significant parts of the Mueller report. Congressman Eric Swalwell, your colleague in the Intel Commission, said Barr should resign. Do you think he needs to step down?
Look, I think he should have never been confirmed, and I said so at the time. And he absolutely should never have been even considered unless he recused himself from an investigation in which he had such an obvious bias. I'm not ready to speculate about whether he should resign or not, given that that's not going to happen anyway. But the fact of the matter is that Bill Barr views himself as the president's lawyer, not the Attorney General of the United States of America. And he, I think, quite deliberately misrepresented in saying that there was no evidence of collusion when that is not what the Mueller report says. When he said that there was no obstruction and that essentially Mueller wanted him to make that decision, gave the impression Mueller did not feel bound by the Office of Legal Counsel opinion. That misled the country. When he provided his own summary, and we now know that Bob Mueller had his own summary. There was nothing preventing Bill Barr from, if he wanted to give advance notice of what the report was going to say, to give Bob Mueller's own words. Bill Barr instead chose to mislead the country with his own spin, a spin that was embraced by the president. And I think that history will reflect that Bill Barr let the country down when it needed an attorney general of substance.
Okay, thanks very much for joining us this morning, Congressman.